You know that feeling, right?
Yeah.
That moment a symptom pops up, maybe a weird ache you don't recognize, or, I don't know, a lump, a flutter,
Oh, yeah. Instantly.
and your mind just whoosh goes straight to the worst case scenario. Fear kicks in.
It's a really powerful, immediate trigger for, well, probably most of us. That physical thing starts a whole mental cascade super fast.
So where does that feeling, that fear, usually push us? It's almost always down that same path, isn't it?
Yeah, the frantic Googling.
Totally. Searching online, calling the doctor, getting tests, then waiting, maybe a referral. It's like you get pulled into this tunnel.
A medical system tunnel. And look, that system is absolutely vital, obviously life-saving for countless things.
Of course.
But when you jump in purely because of that initial, panic, it might not always be the most helpful first move.
Yeah.
Sometimes that path itself just makes the anxiety worse.
Exactly. Which brings us to the big question we're exploring in this deep dive. What if there was another way to handle that first moment? What if the real leverage wasn't just, treating the symptom later or navigating the system, but managing that initial thought, that first wave of fear before it totally takes over?
It's digging into this idea that maybe our first response isn't always a rational risk assessment. It's often more instinctual, maybe fear-based imagination running wild.
Like that peripheral vision versus the spotlight idea. Intuition senses the whole field, but rational thought just zooms in.
Exactly, that initial intuitive flicker, that oh feeling. If the fear hits that driver of thought hard, like that Zeta-9 concept firing millions of times a second.
Then you're caught, like the cricket ball hitting the ground too late.
Right. You're in the loop, stress signals flooding, and then you're heading to the doctor, potentially into a system that reinforces that fear cycle.
So can we influence that driver? Can we catch it before it spirals? That feels like the core.
That's the fascinating territory we're in today. We've been looking at a bunch of sources, some serious research on, well, the terrifying rise of antibiotic resistance.
Yeah, that's sobering stuff.
And a look back at how medicine has evolved. Plus, importantly, the perspective of a doctor who spent decades really thinking about illness, how diagnosis works, and how patients can be more empowered.
A doctor who feels so strongly he actually built a tool to help with this exact problem.
Right. So our mission here is to unpack why our typical reaction to symptoms and the system it often leads us into might sometimes be part of the problem itself.
We'll definitely confront that huge looming threat, superbugs, a really urgent issue.
And then we'll explore how maybe a shift in our own perspective, maybe helped by new tech, could offer a, well, perhaps a revolutionary way towards feeling more resilient and understanding our own health better.
Okay, so let's start with that idea from the sources that we often live under an illusion of fear, especially fear of infections, fear of getting sick.
That's a key point. This fear, it's not always, directly proportional to the actual risk in every single case, but the feeling is very real, psychologically real.
And it drives us to seek help, right? Even for things that might be minor.
Absolutely. A little worry just balloons into fear, and the immediate reaction is often, I need a doctor, I need a test now, get that external fix.
And the sources, well, they don't hold back on critiquing parts of the system we turn to. There's this view that doctors sometimes feel forced to follow protocols.
Procedures that might be more about saving costs than what's truly ideal for that specific patient in front of them.
Which could mean relying on staff with maybe less training or leaning really heavily on standardized tests instead of digging deep into the patient's own story, their experience of the illness.
And this focus on, let's say, rigid protocols or ordering maybe unnecessary tests or even just scheduling follow-ups because that's what we do,
Yeah.
it can actually increase the patient's anxiety, paradoxically. Plus the cost, of course. It creates this whole cycle starting with fear, and the system itself can sometimes keep it going.
Which leads perfectly into something I found really insightful from the sources, this tension they described. Diagnosis as story versus protocol.
Yes, the doctor whose work we're looking at makes a powerful argument here.
What's his take?
He basically says, look, every patient coming in is telling a story. It's a story of an illness as they have lived, experienced, and remembered it.
Okay.
And his view is the doctor's job is primarily to provide a solution based on understanding that unique story, not just hand out a prescription based on a generic checklist or protocol.
That really shifts the focus, doesn't it? Puts the lived experience right at the heart of figuring things out.
It does. But The sources also point out this countertrend in modern medicine, this increasing reliance on just the scans, the lab results, the pre-printed assessment forms.
Right. More data-driven, maybe less narrative-driven.
And the potential danger there,
Hmm.
the sources warn, is that if you prioritize just the data points or protocols over truly listening to the patient's whole story, you risk missing crucial details.
Which could lead to misdiagnosis.
Exactly, or delayed diagnosis. And there are real concerns raised about, say, nurse-led clinics or situations where less trained practitioners are maybe heavily reliant on formularies or strict protocols.
Mhm.
While that might seem efficient on the surface, it's flagged as potentially leading to errors or complications because you lose that nuanced understanding that comes from deep interaction and, frankly, experience.
Yeah.
There are real legal and ethical questions there, too.
It highlights that constant tension between efficiency and truly comprehensive, personalized care.
Now, while we're on the topic of challenges and potential issues, the sources introduce something described in, well, truly alarming terms.
Okay.
Words like baleful threat, a holocaust, something potentially quick and deadly, with, crucially, no current medicine or vaccine to reliably stop it.
Wow. Okay, this isn't just everyday concerns. This is...
This is the threat of superbugs,
Cool.
antibiotic-resistant bacteria. The sources remind us the WHO flagged this years ago, back in 2017.
I remember that list.
Yeah, identifying 12 families of bacteria that are already resistant to many existing antibiotics. They urgently need new treatments because the old ones just aren't working reliably anymore.
And this isn't some sci-fi future problem, is it?
Absolutely not. People are dying now from infections that used to be treatable. And the sources really break down how we ended up here and why it's actually speeding up.
What are the main drivers?
Well, a huge one is simply the massive overuse and misuse of antibiotics in human medicine. They give the example of COVID hospitalizations in the U.S.,
Right.
where something like over half the patients got antibiotics, even though most had a viral infection. Every unnecessary dose is basically a training session for bacteria to get stronger.
And taking antibiotics, it kills the good bacteria too, right? The ones we need.
Exactly. It clears the field, leaving space for any resistant bugs that happen to survive to just flourish. And worse, they can share their resistance genes, like passing cheat codes around to other bacteria, even different types.
So misuse is one factor. What else?
Another really critical piece, according to the sources, is the economics of the pharmaceutical industry. Well, since around the mid-'80s, many big pharma companies shifted focus away from developing new antibiotics. It's just not as profitable as drugs for chronic conditions people take for life.
Ah, so the pipeline for new weapons against these bugs has slowed right down.
To a trickle, essentially, just when we need them most.
Okay, misuse in humans, lack of new drugs.
Hmm?
What else is fueling this?
Agriculture. It's a huge, often underestimated factor. The sources state the biggest consumer of antibiotics worldwide isn't humans.
It's farming.
It's agriculture. They're used routinely in raising food animals, not just to treat sickness, but often just to promote faster growth.
Wow. So constant low-level exposure for bacteria in that environment.
Exactly. It's like a giant incubator for resistance. And those resistant bacteria don't just stay on the farm. They can get into the food chain, travel globally. It's all interconnected.
The sources give specific examples of where this is hitting hard, right?
They do. MRSA, that resistant staph infection, everyone's heard of that. Often hospital-acquired, but also in the community. PPC, Klebsiella pneumonia, carbapenemus, that's a really nasty one spreading in hospitals. Resistant to even last resort antibiotics.
Scary stuff.
And it's not just bacteria. They mention resistance popping up in viruses, like the chickenpox shingles virus becoming resistant to standard antivirals. Fungi developing ways to just pump drugs out. Even parasites, like worms, showing resistance to treatments.
So it's across the board. And layered on top of this, we're seeing other infectious threats returning.
Yeah, things like measles coming back, partly due to vaccine hesitancy fueled by misinformation, often online. Plus increases in complex things like tick-borne illnesses, Lyme disease. It's a complicated picture.
It really drives home the point that this isn't just a problem for doctors and ICUs. It affects everyone. That line from the source sticks. A chain is no stronger than its weakest link.
Exactly. If basic antibiotics stop working reliably, even a simple cut could become life-threatening for absolutely anyone.
And the experience during the pandemic with healthcare systems just overwhelmed.
It really showed, didn't it? We can't just rely solely on the formal healthcare system, especially during major outbreaks. It simply can't cope alone.
So, okay, we have this pattern. Fear driving us into a system with its own limitations, overshadowed by this massive, growing threat of superbugs. It feels like we need something else.
Which is precisely where the sources pivot towards a different approach,
Yeah.
empowering the individual, giving people more tools and understanding.
And this is where that doctor we mentioned earlier comes back in, Dr. Kadiel M. Srivatsa, and the tool he developed.
Right, the Dr. Maya app.
MAYA, what does that stand for again?
Medical Advice you assess, which, as the sources point out, is quite clever because Maya also means illusion in Sanskrit.
Ah, linking back to that illusion of fear idea. Nice touch.
Yeah. And the app itself, available on smartphones, is designed to be pretty straightforward. You feel a symptom, you start inputting information.
Starts broad, like maybe 3 main symptoms, then gets more specific, like what kind of cough is it? That sort of detail.
Exactly. And the core goal, as the sources describe it, is to help you, the user, get a sense of the potential severity of your condition yourself based on the information you provide.
So the aims are reducing unnecessary doctor visits, saving costs.
Those are definitely stated goals, but a really key one is reducing that patient anxiety, that spiral that often starts with just not knowing what's going on or how serious it might be.
Does it replace doctors?
No, not at all. The sources mention it includes options to connect with actual physicians or experts via video or calls if needed, but a big part of its function is trying to sort of decode the diagnostic process for the user.
Demystify it a bit. Show how doctors might think through these symptoms.
Precisely, which ties right back to that core idea of empowerment and managing that initial thought.
Right. Instead of just blind fear, you get some information, some context before the panic fully sets in.
It gives you a tool to make a first assessment yourself, using reliable logic, potentially helping you figure out if something is likely minor and doesn't need that immediate rush into the system. It's about catching that thought, like we talked about.
The sources connect this directly to that concept, that it's not just the behavior like rushing to the doctor that needs changing.
It's the underlying driver that triggers your imagination, thoughts, and feelings. The app is presented as a way to help manage that driver.
By using knowledge and structured self-assessment to dial down the fear and uncertainty.
Exactly. Which then leads into this broader argument from the sources that managing health, fighting infection, it's not just the job of healthcare workers.
It's a shared responsibility. Individuals, policymakers, industry, farming, everyone has a part to play.
And tools like this app, potentially, can help individuals make more informed decisions. Decisions that benefit not just them, but the wider community.
How so?
Well, for instance, the sources argue that if individuals are better equipped to recognize potential signs of infection early and maybe isolate themselves appropriately, that's crucial for slowing transmission.
Especially with resistant bugs where containment is everything.
Absolutely. It reinforces that idea, especially after COVID, that public health can't just rely on the formal system reacting. Individual awareness and proactive steps are vital first lines of defense.
There's also a more personal note in the sources, isn't there, about resilience?
Yes, a reflection on how facing fears, navigating challenges, actually reveals our own competence and ability. It's a reminder that getting through tough times, whether personal health scares or global threats like superbugs, can actually make us stronger.
And despite the seriousness of the superbug threat, the sources do end on a note of, well, hope.
They do. There's a sense that by working together, individuals becoming more informed and active, combined with technological advancements and collective action from all sectors, we can tackle this threat and work towards a healthier future.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. From that initial gut punch of fear when a symptom appears, through the ways the traditional system can sometimes feed into that fear spiral,
Right.
confronting the really stark reality of antibiotic resistance,
It's a huge challenge.
and landing on this potential for individual empowerment, for taking a more active role, using information and tools.
And the core takeaway seems to be that changing how we react in those very first moments, it's key.
By being better informed, using tools for assessment, understanding our body's signals.
It's not just about, fewer doctor visits or saving a bit of money, though that's part of it. It's really about building resilience, cutting down on that anxiety loop.
And critically, playing our part in protecting the community from the spread of dangerous infections.
Yeah, that collective responsibility aspect is huge.
Which leaves us with that final, provocative thought for you, our listener, to maybe chew on. What if the most vital medical skill you could cultivate in this century isn't necessarily about breakthrough drugs or fancy new machines, but it's about learning to really listen to your own body, to temper that first jolt of fear with reliable information, and to trust your own informed self-assessment. How could that fundamentally shift your whole relationship with your health and with fear itself?